Welcome, everybody. Thanks for coming out for our lightning talks today. We have some amazing speakers, obviously, which we've seen today, but we also have some amazing attendees. And so, of course, why not let some of those attendees share some of the stories and things that they've learned. And so I'm really excited to see what we get to hear today. For anybody who is here and has not yet shuffled down, we're going to we have Paul here. Paul, can you raise your hand? Paul is going to coordinate our rapid 5-minute time limit, which we have a timer here for all of you lightning speakers to be able to share your story and then hand off, and then we're going to get you mic'd up. As we see, how many can we get through? We've got 10 folks signed up. If we do 5 minutes each, we'll be able to get all 10. It's a challenge. Can we do it? Let's find out. I'm really excited to get started with our first speaker. So everybody, please give a warm round of applause for Kim Crayton.
Hello, hello. So welcome to day 107 of TFIF 365. And one of the things, it's one thing to teach a theory, and it's another thing to live a theory. And in 2024, I have committed, because I've been talking about this shit for years, and none of y'all can seem to get it. So you know what? I'm going to model it. I'm going to model it. I'm going to be a model for you. And so what I do is create short-form videos every day, and I've made a commitment every day to get up on this, to share what I do, so people can see what it's like to live the way I live. So I share my wins, my mistakes, lessons learned, and it's unfiltered, unrehearsed, and it's my most vulnerable work yet. I want to thank Ariel for posing such thoughtful questions yesterday. My hope that is after this 5 minutes, many will have embraced the optimism that I have. So, profit without oppression, an alternative way forward. These are my guiding principles. Tech is not neutral nor apolitical. Intention without strategy is chaos. Lack of inclusion is a risk and increasingly a crisis management issue. Prioritize the most vulnerable. When I wrote Profit Without Oppression, that was the first step in creating this alternative economic ecosystem rooted in supremacy-free, coercion-free, discrimination-free, and exploitation-free. And that's what the Future is Free stands for. As I'm listening to all these talks, people are asking, how do we get there? This is how you get there. So some facts. I've abandoned my previous work, so what I was doing here last year, I'm no longer doing. And it's both exhilarating and terrifying to start from absolute scratch. It is my most vulnerable work, and it demands that I step outside of my comfort zone and model living a supremacy-free, coercion-free, discrimination-free, and exploitation-free life. Although it's not easy, anecdotal data for clients and volunteers confirm that it's improved people's mental health and their overall well-being, and that's what we need, is particularly in our space. So what follows is a brief overview of what my most magical, creative, meaningful, and ambitious work to date. The Profit Without Oppression triune. It includes education, a business model development, and industry and policy influence. Education. The goal is to democratize business school education. There is no way in hell people should go into as much debt as I went to get this information, as well as it being gatekept. And I want to develop a collective supremacy-free, coercion-free, discrimination-free, and exploitation-free perspective, which leads to strategic engagement and documented outcomes. I cannot do this by myself. And so with that, I want to start my own business school called the Both Institute, where I'm educating future academics and business leaders. So that's the first part. The second, give me a second. I went ahead. So that's that. Okay, so then the next stop is the business model development. Build scalable, profitable businesses. We're not doing nonprofits. These are profitable businesses with supremacy-free, coercion-free, discrimination-free, and exploitation-free at its root. And so I want to focus on ethical tourism, because my life is expanded by just traveling the world, going to tech conferences, and it should not be gatekept. It should be available to most people. I don't know where that came from. Okay, it's a form of, and so what I'm interested in is how can we get the benefits of tourism without all the harm that we're causing when we're going to these places, right? So that's something that I'm researching. So the next one is the industry policy influence. To inform and aid policymakers and influence industry norms by adopting supremacy, coercion, discrimination, and exploitation-free perspective. And I'm doing that with a current project that I'm doing. It's called the Indigenous Economies Project. And it aims to understand the connection between economic progress in a town in Merida, Yucatan, Mexico, where they have this new Mayan train, and there's so many expats coming. But how is that going to impact the indigenous community, particularly those who are in the tourism business? And I want to know, can they coexist? So current blockers are challenges, time affluence, information and resource asymmetry. So what do I need? From Priya, what do I need? Many of you in this very room are here because you believe that there's a better way forward. Here's your opportunity to move past intention towards impact, to support the work that you are not qualified to do. So if you go to kimcrayton.com/thisnextthing, I am a self-funded, independent scholar practitioner, and I need your financial support. I can't get this done without your, I am self-funding this. And so I'm reaching out to my community and say, if this is something you believe in, let's put our money where our mouth is. Stop like all these people talked up here about how things are and problematic. Well, I have some solutions for you, but I can't do it on my own. So that's my time.
Thank you so much, Kim. So we'll get Jonathan plugged in here briefly, and then we will resume.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me. I am John Gottfried. I've been spending my entire career building developer communities at places like Twilio, Startup Bus, all around New York City. And I'm also the co-founder of the largest community of early career developers in the world, Major League Hacking. We help students learn through play and experiential learning to bridge the gap from theory to actual practice. My main non-tech hobby is baking. Happy to talk more about that. Got lots of crazy stories. But that is not at all what I'm talking about today. What I'm going to talk about today is an esoteric online game that I've been running for about 20, 25 years. It is a MUD. For those of you here who are of a certain age, that might ring a bell. This is a Star Wars themed MUD called Legends of the Jedi. And for those of you who aren't familiar with MUDs, they're entirely text-based multiplayer online games. So imagine the world of an MMO, but everything is described in writing. All of your commands are written. All of your interactions with other players are written. So this talk is actually about lessons I've learned from community building after having many of the same players and staff and volunteers for decades now in a niche online community. So the first topic I want to share here is that in our game, everything is impermanent. People spend years or months or potentially longer building their characters, and death, when those characters die, is impermanent, right? They don't get the character back. What this leads to is a really interesting community dynamic where people are constantly forced to reinvent themselves. There's no entrenched, this guy's the strongest one in the game, because they die frequently, and every couple of years we wipe every single character in the game and make everyone start over. This has created a really positive, very sort of like refreshing community dynamic, because you don't end up with people amassing tons of followers or tons of reputation, since everyone is forced to reinvent the wheel on a recurring basis. The next big thing I've learned is that we have a really interesting identity structure, and there's a lot of discourse around identity on the internet. In our world, we have this concept of hybrid identities. So who you are as a character in the game is anonymous from your real-life persona. And people do share their real-life personas. But what ends up happening here is people build these really strong interpersonal connections around who they are outside of the game, their shared values, their shared interests. And when they go into the game in this little microcosm of the world, all of that goes out the window, and they could be the best of friends or the worst of enemies because they're anonymous. And I think this is kind of an interesting contrast to a lot of social networks out there that either force anonymity or force identity, because it allows people to have the best of both worlds and build something that looks like them and also something that looks nothing like who they are in reality. And that ends up being a really powerful part of what has made this so sustainable and also such a healthy, long-running community. The next big thing here, and this is perhaps more personal to me, is that running a community for 20 years is kind of a labor of love, right? There's a lot of blood, sweat, and tears that goes into it. And I know a lot of people here are running conferences, events, communities of their own. I think it's incredibly important to design the community for your needs as well as the needs of the members. Otherwise, there is a very high rate of burnout among community leaders, and it doesn't become a sustainable thing. And so all of the staff of this game, right, it doesn't make any money. We all do it for fun. And there's an element of this being a collective side project for everyone involved, where if it were not fun, none of us would devote any time to it. So we embrace people's weird, out-of-the-box ideas in a very experimental format because it's what they want to do and what they want to spend their time on as volunteers. And usually that results in more magical, more interesting experiences for the community members because they get to sort of experience the efforts of this group creativity that's happening in this game. And so I do think that like some level of self-serving community leadership is actually really important for longevity. And the last thing that I'll leave you with here is that in small communities, feedback can work. You know, when we look at all of these online communities and a lot of the toxicity that kind of comes up around them, and compare it to something like This Next Thing or this game that I run, one of the things that I've found over the years is that even though some behaviors are irredeemable, in the vast majority of cases, as a community leader, you can actually tell someone what behavior you're looking for, why their behavior does not match those expectations, and give them some room to grow. And that leads to a sort of like self-fulfilling prophecy where people start to enforce those same expectations and dynamics amongst each other, and to actually treat that with feedback and not just sort of like ostracizing them entirely. Some of our most toxic community members have become some of our most positive contributors over the years, and it's exactly because of this. So thank you very much. Those are my 4 lessons from my weird esoteric mud, and look forward to everyone else's talks. So thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Jonathan. We'll get our next speaker up, Majken. Oh, hey, yes. Welcome. Do you have slides, or are you?
I just got one there. That's
Perfect.
It. Yeah, very
All right,
good.
everyone, a round of applause for Majken.
So good afternoon, and thank you very much for having me. As you can see, I'm probably dressed a little bit different than the rest of you, and I'm also in a different field than probably the rest of you are today. So my background is Michelin-star restaurants. 11 years ago, I started my first Michelin-star restaurant where I took education as a sommelier. But what I want to talk about is not the wine; it's actually the non-alcoholic offering we have in the world, because I want to change that. So 11 years ago, when I came into the restaurant, we have all these fancy restaurants, but what we were serving the guests that wasn't drinking was very plain, boring juices. So I started to come around with that philosophy about why we're not using the wine profile we have to create something that's as tasty when we have for a non-alcoholic. So as you said, most of you probably been out to restaurant, had an evening when you don't drink, and the only offering that really would be Coke, soda, apple juice, nothing more complex. And I wanted to change that. And a lot of you thinking now, why the heck would a sommelier start to doing this thing? I didn't start drinking until I was 21. So my very first drink was actually a glass of wine when I started taking my education, because I'm very into what a palate and food doing to our tongue, and the algorithm of our tongue as well. So 6 years ago, I opened my own restaurant together with my husband, and after 4.5 months, we achieved 2 Michelin stars. I started to be really well known in the food industry for doing non-alcoholic and starting helping a restaurant around the world about doing the non-alcoholic pairings. A year ago, we decided to branch out of the restaurant, and I choose to start my new journey back. So back, gonna be non-alcoholic fusion. That's probably what we're gonna call it. Juice is not the right word. And what we're doing is we use fruit, vegetable juices, we infuse it with tea, vegetable, herbs, balsamic to create the same complexity as you would have in wine. As I said, I'm 2 months away from launching. For the one there's still tickets as a 5 o'clock slot today, so we do like tasting. I have my husband with me as well, so we do like a bit of wine, food, drink tasting over here. If any of you want to see what we are about as well, you're more than welcome. And as I said, what I want to do is like really change our whole drink reception. So this is not only a product for people that don't drink, it's also a product for the drinkers, but they only want 1 or 2 glasses of wine on a Wednesday evening, or to things like this throughout the day. So it's something you can enjoy that a little bit more complex. So thank you very much for your time.
Thanks, Majken. We'll get Evan up now.
Thanks, Hans.
All right, everybody, a round of applause for Evan Phoenix.
All right, so this is, all right, let's see if this works. All right, we're gonna try the old iPhone remote thing too. You know, like use all the technology, just use it up, right? It's not useful if I don't use it. So this is a lightning talk that I didn't put a title on. So Act 1. Sometime in 1986, I was living in Billings, Montana, because that's where I lived then. And I went into Target and I bought a compact disc. So Target, for those of you who haven't been, is just a big store that sells a bunch of stuff, right? And when I bought this CD, I bought it from a weird end cap. Basically just a place randomly in the store that was a little cardboard stand that sold CDs. And that CD was this CD right here, which is a CD called Scottish Moors in the Lifescapes Favorites collection. And it sounds something like this. Oh, we're going to go max volume here. I'm still here. I'm just squatting down, everyone, just so you can hear it. All right, we'll keep going. So it's a whole CD like that, right? So, and I'm 16 at the time. And so I bought a whole CD of light, I don't know what you would even call it, right? And so after a lot of listening to, at the time, Nirvana and Offspring and the occasional Tori Amos, suddenly I was immersed in the world of what I call maximum downtempo. Right? It was whatever punk rock is, and you flipped it upside down, the complete opposite, right? And at the time, I'd never really listened to music like that. I'd never had exposure to it. And I found myself so drawn to it and listening to it in all kinds of times and all kinds of places. And I realized, like, oh man, if I'm anxious on the plane, if I'm before school, if I'm kind of just worried about a test or something, I would put it on and I'd be like, okay, I'm calm. It was the first time that I had that experience. And it carried that CD through many different formats. It carried it, I ripped it onto a mini disc player. I listened to it on a mini disc for a number of years. I ripped it onto the original iPod. Mine looked like this at one point, but this is not mine. And I listened to it for quite some time. And then, as all things do, the media formats also change, and time passes. And eventually, I don't listen to it anymore, right? The Moors stand quiet after a while. Let's go into Act 2. Jeff Victor. Who the heck is Jeff Victor? Well, this is his picture off of his webpage. Jeff Victor this is literally copied from his bio on his webpage. This is what Jeff says about himself. He's an accomplished musician and composer. He's played with a bunch of bands, traveling bands. He's notably the in-house organist for a basketball team, right? And he's also sold 1.5 million units of Target's Lifescapes music series. He is the one who made this CD. Jeff in his own words, here's his bio. We're going to go a little bit faster because I'm running out of time. What was Lifescapes? Well, Lifescapes was this music brand to make new age Celtic and light classical jazz that effectively was just a Target in-house brand. So they sold 1.5 CDs, by the way. This is on Spotify, which we'll see in a second. It only has 2 million listens over the past decade. So no one has listened to this CD. Here it is. I love this art. I had to put this down here mostly because this is a review off of the Disco, the discography site, from 2024. People still like me listening to this album, one of the best of the Lifescape series. I thought that was hilarious. I found that yesterday. So, life continues. And again, I started on Spotify in 2021. I found this email, dug up this email today, which I thought was funny. And as a note here, Spotify reminded me so much of the idea of a listening station, right? We had these listening stations in record stores that you go in and you get exposed to new sorts of things. And when Spotify finally came out, when we had streaming, it felt like we were finally getting the ability to listen to all kinds of music without having to, I got to put $15 down for a CD that I might not like. And one day, I was on Spotify, this is almost a year ago, and Spotify says, hey, you might like this album called Scottish Moors. And I can't tell you, I get chills thinking about seeing it and listening to it for the first time again after not listening to it for almost 10 years. And it was like an embrace from an old friend. It was like the algorithm is actually working for me in this moment. It has brought this old friend back to me. And it really made me realize how much it had meant to me way back in the days to hear it again for the first time after hearing it for so many years. And I kind of reflected on that in those moments that our lives are just these series of moments, and lots of times we only know, this was an important time in my life. This was I made this decision, I could have gone here, could have done this. So we're a collection of these tiny moments. And those calm, serene tones helped me through so much of what it was in my early life. And so what I want to leave you today here is that you can do as much market analysis, you can do as much. Target did a whole bunch of weird market research, and they did not find 16-year-old boy on their market research list for this album, right? So you put something out there, your audience for whatever you're doing, whatever you're creating is unknown. Your impact is completely unknown, right? You have to create for its own sake, for what you want to do, for the creation's sake, because you don't know what kind of audiences that you're going to find with whatever you're going to get out there and create. And the impact of those creations, it will be far vaster and far more unknown than you could ever have thought. Much like the Moors of Scotland. And that's it. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Evan.
I'm Jeff O'Callaghan. Thanks very much to the organizers for allowing me to speak in front of you today. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about some science. So I work in Trinity College, Dublin, Ireland. And I've been there quite a while. I first started by studying general science. For my PhD, I focused on gene therapy for ocular disorders. I'm currently a postdoctoral research fellow in the neurovascular genetics lab. In 2018, I co-founded my first company for glaucoma gene therapy. That company is called Exora. And in more recent years, I help other researchers quantify their biological data using some of my own bespoke software tools. So I'm going to talk a little bit about my different research interests today, just briefly. The first is the glaucoma gene therapy. So glaucoma, if you're not familiar, is characterized as a disease with increased pressure inside of your eye. So this fluid is under increased pressure. That pressure is translated to the back of the eye where it can damage the optic nerve, and if left untreated, can lead to irreversible blindness. And there's about 80 million people affected worldwide by glaucoma, so having a single once-off treatment for these patients would be extremely meaningful for them. And in brief, our therapy involves using a modified virus that's injected into the front of the eye. And from there, it produces our own optimized gene that unclogs the outflow channels. So this allows the fluid to exit the eye, reducing its pressure and preventing any further vision loss. And so far, we've shown that this works in mouse, monkeys, and human donor eyes. So this is a picture of a human eye connected to a system I developed to help measure the rate of fluid flow inside the eye. And we've shown that it has an excellent safety profile. So currently, we're doing some primate studies in monkey for long-term safety before we can do human clinical trials. So this lets me go out to the Caribbean to work with the monkeys every now and again, so I can't complain too much. And of the many things I've learned, one thing that stands out is gene therapy development is very slow. There's so many things that force you to wait. So in the meantime, I decided to look at some of the other projects that we're working on in the lab. And I noticed very quickly that we have tons and tons of biological data being produced in the lab. So whether it's DNA sequencing data, or whether it's image data, such as patient retinal images from our various clinical studies. So how do we gain insights from all of this data? Well, I decided to learn to code so that I could build these sequencing pipelines. And these pipelines help us to analyze biological samples that tells us more about the important genes in different biological processes or diseases. And so these types of pipelines are typically only available to those who really know how to code, so they become quite bespoke. So I decided to build these pipelines, but also put on a very simple user interface so that scientists in the lab and other labs in college can run their own pipelines using their own data. And this has been very enabling for our lab and others in that we have now access to these different types of experiments, and we can gain new insights into our data. And so for this, I decided to learn these various languages and frameworks, which turned out to be a very interesting stack to work with. So I also mentioned we have tons of patient images, and these are called fluorescein angiograms, or FFA. And they're basically images of the back of the eye, the retina, and particularly the blood vessels. So typically a dye is injected, it lights up the blood vessels, and you can image that with special hardware. And that's typically done to confirm a diagnosis or monitor disease progression or assess treatment efficacy. But unfortunately, there's a lot of shortcomings with these images, in that they're strictly qualitative. They require experienced professionals to interpret the images, and typically doctors are just looking at these by eye, and it's very easy for them to miss any small indications or small changes. And we've discovered in our lab that small changes are very important. So to address all of these different shortcomings, I came up with this software called FOVIS, which stands for Fluorescent Ocular Vasculature Analysis Suite. And it's basically a way to automate the quantification of all of these images, and essentially measures vessel permeability or leakage. So the typical pipeline is pre-processing of all of these images, aligning all of these images, which is called registration, looking at different regions of interest, so we can place a grid, like you see on the left, to allow us to look at very specific parts of the retina. And then we can extract the intensity data, and then we can generate various visual representations and detailed quantifiable assessments of the retinal vasculature. And we're currently working on some deep learning methods to help with the segmentation of the retina, which helps with our pre-processing steps. And with all of this data that we've collected, we can embed all of it into FOVIS so that any new patients or new disease groups that come along, we can compare those images to our own internal data sets and see if these images look like healthy eyes or diseased eyes. And our goals with the software is to deploy it in academic labs like ours, in other R&D departments, and also in the clinic. And in clinics, that'll allow clinicians to view real-time assessments of retinal blood vessels, and hopefully allow them ultimately to intervene in a patient's journey earlier, which means that they can save as much vision as possible. And we've got partners in the clinic and also in big pharma that are using our prototype. But over the next year or so, we hope to develop this prototype, make it a bit more production ready, and also embed some regulatory compliance in the category of software as a medical device. So we still have a lot to learn on this front. So a whistle-stop tour on what it's like to be a scientist transitioning to software. Thank you very much for listening.
Thanks, Jeff. We'll get our next speaker up. Everybody, a round of applause for Taylan Pince.
Thank you. All right, so I'm going to talk a little bit about creativity and what it means to me, and hopefully I'll change some minds. So, the definition of creativity has been changing, at least for me. I ran this today with ChatGPT. I had it write a murder mystery in the Swiss Alps at a conference, where a murder happens, and it came up with a pretty decent story. The way I feel about this is that I absolutely hate it. I hate the fact that this is possible, that I can just write a little prompt and it'll come up with a decent story that's, getting better by the day, by the month with every new release. And I find this really worrying. And I thought to myself, why do I find this so concerning? And, so to explain that, let's step back and talk about what is creativity, right? And to me, creativity is really more about, it could be about anything. A lot of people say they're not creative, which I don't think is ever right, because creativity can take any shape or form. You can use it for, really just writing or arts, but you could also use it, I find coding a really creative activity, I find, even Excel sheets can be really creative. I saw this the other day where they have these Excel spreadsheet competitions somewhere in the US, and people come up with really creative ways of using Excel. Or circuit board design, which is a rabbit hole that I fell into during the pandemic, can be really creative. And all of these are just different ways of using our brains to just open new pathways and come up with new ways of doing things. And sometimes it can be really interesting, because I think anything that can tickle your brain the right way can be a creative act. So one way that I really wanted to consciously apply this is when my first daughter was 2 years old. She was asking me always for stories, and we were reading books. And I said, okay, I'm going to tell you a new story every day. And we did this for, I think, easily 4 years, until she was about 6. Every day I told her a new story. I came up with something new. And I found that this really deeply changed our relationship. It changed me in a way where I became more creative, because coming up with a new story every day is not easy. And it also changed her. It made her really interested in fiction and storytelling and creative ways of coming up with things. So I recommend these kinds of exercises for everyone. I think it's super interesting. And then one thing I learned from my wife, who's an art teacher and also she's an artist, is the concept of process art. So this is essentially the idea of making art not for the end result, not for what you're trying to produce, but just for the process itself. And I find this incredibly meditating. She does this with kids, she does this with adults as well. It doesn't matter what you use, it doesn't matter where you're trying to get to. It's not about creating something beautiful or interesting. The end result is usually just thrown away. But the process is transforming, and it's really interesting, because it really, I think, impacts certain parts of your brain that are different than what we usually leverage. So going back to ChatGPT, I think LLMs are really making it a bit too easy for us to come up, especially in writing, to come up with concepts, to come up with stories. And they're really just, I think tools really define who we are. I think it was Jobs who said, bicycle for the mind, for computers. I think LLMs are really becoming self-driving motorcycles for the mind. And I find that really scary in many aspects. So, and another thing that I think you need for being creative is boredom. You need to be bored. So this is a little sketch that last Sunday my daughter was doing. We went out to eat some pizza, and she was bored. She didn't have her book. She said, "Daddy, I'm bored. What am I going to do?" So I gave her a pencil, and just on the napkins, she made this little drawing, and I found it hilarious and super creative and super interesting. And it doesn't matter what you do in the end. It doesn't matter. And we threw it away. We just left it at the restaurant. Like, it's not something that you save. But that process again, made her think. We talked about graphic design. She was imagining, could I do some drawings, illustrations for this pizza restaurant that I love? So I find that really interesting, and I'm concerned that we're losing our wandering minds when we can just go to a prompt and write something, and it just gives back, spits it out immediately for us. So this is me and my daughter more recently, and for this conference, I was thinking, I want to make a game that people can play. I want to make something that's creative, that's going to engage people. So she came up with this idea where she said, I want to make illustrations for these people that I've never met, and I want them to come up with stories, and I want them to be collaborative. So it was her idea. I coded up for her, and she came up with these illustrations by herself, and she came up with these different characters that she named. And the idea is, I sent the link a few times in WhatsApp. Already a few of you have engaged, and I love that. I love the stories that are emerging. So, you can go there, you can sign up, you can write a little tweet, tweet-sized little chapter on a story. You won't be able to write it right away because it's sequential, so there are only a few, story lanes that are available. But, if you get in there, when it's your turn, you'll get an email, and then you'll get to write your little chapter, and then we're going to conclude the stories at some point. It's going to be 5 or 6 different chapters for each story. And I'll just share the results, and then I'm going to just destroy it all. Just like any good process art, it's going to go away. So this is not some project that I'm launching or whatever. It's just going to go away. But I hope you'll participate. I hope you'll enjoy, and I hope you'll continue being creative and creating things. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Taylan. We'll get our next speaker up. I love the wide range of topics. You couldn't have planned a more diverse. I'm learning about how eye disease works and art process and wine and also so many things. So excited to see what we get next.
Hi everyone, I hope you're all having an amazing time here in Pontresina. My name is Fatma, and today I'm going to be giving you a lightning talk on light. And God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. This is a verse from the Genesis explaining the beginning of everything. Now, I don't want any of you leaving thinking that this is going to be a Bible study. I'm not even Christian. I'm only stating this to explain to you the perception of light in people's heads. Light is the beginning. Light is good. Light is happiness. Light is hope. And light is magic. Light is everything. Light is described in such a positive way, but the truth is, it still is an underrated topic. It is not being praised for the right properties it has, but rather for the metaphorical views of it. Light allows us to see things. It can kill bacteria and viruses. It can help with age and skin. It can be used to treat eczema and can even boost your mental health. Light can do many things, and I hope to mention a few of these things during this talk. Before I delve into it, though, I want to explain who I am and why am I interested in such a random topic. In the early years of my biomedical engineering degree, I got really interested in UV light and its germicidal properties, so I started doing some research with them. We were able to build a hand sanitization device that used far UVC light to kill the pathogens on your hands. And I now work for a startup called Akara Robotics, where we build UV robots for hospital disinfection purposes. Because of these random interests, I've been called many names: the light girl, the UV girl, and even the microwave girl, which I'm not going to go into that for now. Light, the most important quality of light is sight. The only reason why you can see me up at this stage is because of light. And of course, you can't deny the help of your eyes too. The light rays that are falling on me are getting reflected and reaching your retina, which then gets transmitted into electrical signals and then travels to your brain to form an image in your head. As Priya was mentioned earlier on, the image that you might have in your head might not match the image somebody else has in their head. This is because of the signal processing. In the ancient Greek times, Plato believed in the emission theory, which is that the beams of light that were coming out from the eyes enabled us to see the object, and there was no external source of light was needed. This, of course, was disproven later on, and we do need the light. And there are many different types of lights. These type of lights are categorized based on their wavelength. We've got UV light, we've got visible light, and we've also got infrared light. We've already established UVC. UVC is an amazing light at killing bacteria and viruses, but one unfortunate thing is that it is really bad for your skin and eyes. Not a big deal, it just can cause cancer, so avoid it at all costs. So all the UVC that are coming from the sun gets absorbed by the ozone layer so that it doesn't reach over here. That means that the UVC that we have here are all man-made. And the far UVC light that I mentioned earlier on is a type of a UVC light. The only difference is that it's at the far end of the UV spectrum, which means that it is more safe for skin and eyes, and it is still as effective in killing pathogens. Moving on to UVB. UVB is used to treat conditions like eczema or psoriasis. It can also help stimulate the production of vitamin D for good, strong bones, and you will definitely need that if you're thinking of hiking during this week. And next, we have UVA. If you're one of those people who are as white as Swiss cheese and want a bit of color, we've got UVA to cover for you. And with a little exposure of sun and patience, you can get the tan you want, unless you're a little unlucky and might end up like this man over here. Visible lights are the type of lights that we can see with our eyes. The two most prominent lights we use are the blue and the red light. They're both great in their own ways, so don't worry, you don't need to make a choice. The blue light boosts alertness, it helps with memory, and it can also elevate your mood, not that you need over here. And red light over here, red light is your go-to light if you care about a youthful and beautiful skin. It smooths out your fine lines, it helps with wrinkles, and it stimulates the production of collagens. And we've got two main types of infrared lights, near and far. Both of these near and far infrared lights can be used for treating conditions of pain and stiffness, as it can penetrate through the deep layers of the skin. And then the near infrared light is also great at cell repairing and wound healing. And the far infrared light has been shown to improve the health of blood vessels and also reduce arrhythmias. Light is amazing. Light is magic. Light is only one source, but it's got many benefits. You can consider light just like as a Swiss Army knife. It's got multiple use cases and can be adapted for any problem. Thank you for listening. I hope you've enjoyed. Please feel free to come and chat to me if you have any questions.
Please put hands together for Marcel Gazer.
Hi, everybody. I was very unprepared, and yet I feel I have a gift for you. I want to share a little bit my story and how I got to this powerful gift of gratitude. Some also call me the business Buddha. I was most of my life more business than Buddha. And that meant out the world focused, burning out, building companies after each other. And then I finally left that rabbit hole 2015 because of a health crisis, or a trigger moment, as I would say. And I wanted to ask how many of you had kind of these big trigger events? Oh, quite many. There is actually a book out there which is called Falling Upwards, and it describes these two parts of life. The first one, service to self, ego, money, career. Something happens. In my case, it was a brain tumor. And then you go to the second phase of life, which is service to others, or going inside. For me, what really was the breakthrough moment was when I left, of course, my startups 2015 because of an evil investor. And I went to a healing journey to Tibet because I refused traditional medicine. I wanted to cure my cancer with natural medicine. And it's a rare disease. Tony Robbins has the same. It's called gigantism. And it was for me, was no surprise after 2 years traveling the planet, what was the cause of this disease, that my whole life was kind of gigantic. So even the cancer was kind of a representation of who my life was before I changed to truly find myself and to become, as I call, fully alive. For me, this was changed a lot my doing and my being. So I helped a lot of startups the past 10 years as a business angel, coach, mentor. And my whole journey became like a flow and effortless, because I never really need to know what I'm actually meant to do on this planet, because I just surrender as a tool to the divine. And that also led me to a lot of magic events, conferences. I kind of knew about COVID 2 years before it actually happened, so it's really magic in all the levels. And I think that's what I want to give to you, this sentence of that you can really surrender and trust the universe, that there is a plan for everybody of us, and you don't need to worry what's really your task. Like this tool to divine, for me, brought a lot of change. And I was in Tibet with this shaman from Italy who became my spiritual teacher, and he gave me this very powerful gift, which is basically to connect our mind with our heart. And that's where I operate now also with the investors, the family office I work with, the startups, fully here. I can't read business plans anymore. I can't go to traditional conferences anymore. The gift of gratitude goes this way. Every time when I have a grateful moment like this here, being here with you in this beautiful setup, I touch my heart, my mind, and send it to the universe. Maybe some people want to do it. You feel immediately the change. I do sometimes in meetings, on my motorbike, in the car. So you say for yourself, from heart to mind to universe. And it's really astonishing when you do it. I do it daily many times. The universe is responding. Like the connections I make, it's really a miracle. And maybe the last now, after 10 years of service to others, Marek, my business partner from Estonia, and myself, we are building now the home of growth. So it's the consequence of my life, combining like the business and spirituality, where we kind of share homes. We call them living homes or home of growth, where we not only talk about business, we talk about business, I still enjoy business, but primarily we talk about us as human beings and how it is to have a human experience. And I already had a lot of amazing conversation here also, like AI. For example, I feel AI. I struggle to explain AI because I can see it all in my eyes, but I can't verbally express it. So that's the level of deepness what we aim with Akasha, the home of growth. Thank you.
I think we might have another no slides. Awesome. All right, everybody, a round of applause for Dima.
Hey guys, girls. I can do one better than no slides. There's a secret. I don't know what I'm going to talk about. Because I had a dream or an idea a few months ago. I like to do public talking and speaking. My mom is an actress, so being on stage is kind of like, I feel like it's my home. I'm still nervous a little bit always, and I love that feeling. But I had an idea. Why can't I do a talk that's not a talk, where there's nothing that I actually know what I'm going to talk about? And the way to do that is, well, I need your help. Because there was a speaker earlier, prior, who talked about, well, what do you need? I always thought about, I used to organize conferences, and I used to do a lot of talks, and people give talks, and I realized when I was doing like, I don't know, 100 events a year, I never asked people what do they want to listen to, and what do they want people to talk about. So this talk is for you. So what I want you to do is to tell me right now, what do you need? Caveat, I'm not a techie, so I can't solve any coding problems, right? Just say it out loud. A question, a problem that you have, a topic you want me to talk about, anything. Do it. Martial arts retreat. Okay. You see, I have a blue eye on my left eye. And it's not an accident. I didn't get into a fight with a random Italian. I got into a fight with 6 non-random Estonians because we were in the Italian mountains in Lake Garda doing martial arts and fighting basically every single day. And martial arts, which is, I do Kung Fu, Wing Chun martial arts, and this martial art is something that I found is very necessary for me as a human being, but also as a man, because I felt that in the world that I live in today, right now, I can't express my yang energy. So yin yang, you know, the two sides, right? You know, it's very hard to like scream and be like, "Argh!" You know, people like, it's okay on stage, right? But like, if I get off stage and do that, everybody like, who's this crazy guy? Put him up, lock him, and put him in a medical center, right? Or if I go, hey man, can we fight? Can we fight? Come on, right? I did computer games, that helped. But I realized that I need something to like let my energy out, and I found martial arts. Wing Chun specifically. Don't do Wing Chun. If you're gonna do martial arts, never do it because it's too traditional with most teachers. Our teacher forces us to fight, which is good. Proof over here. Actually, my cornea is cut. That's much worse on this eye, but you cannot see it. I had to go to the hospital. And like what I find in martial arts and in Kung Fu specifically, and which I think is maybe what I'll talk about for the rest of my 2 minutes and 16 seconds, is the slogan of our club, which is development through practice. And I find that I've been doing startups for 2 decades or something, and I mentor startups, I mentor founders, and what I found is that we live in a world of theory. You know, we live in a world where we go like, well, how to build the best company, and there's like 20 books about it, and everybody has an advice on it, everybody has a thing on it, and the same with martial arts. Most martial arts is highly traditional. You put a video out, and there's going to be like 50 people who are like professional martial artists on their sofa. And they'd be like, oh no, you're doing this jam wrong, and you're doing this wrong, and your form is not correct, and your structure is wrong. I'm like, yeah, come to Estonia, let's you know, spar. It's like, no, I'm good here in China, it's fine. And I feel that it's the same with what we do in our lives. I do a lot of self-development, and what I find is, again, it's a lot of theory. And it's a lot about like, well, let's read a book. or let's go to a one-day retreat, or let's go to a 10-minute talk. And what I'm maybe calling you to do is to find ways to put everything that you do in practice instead of theory. So I mean, if you're going to do meditation, don't do those 15-minute apps every day. They don't work, right? Practice means like 2 hours a day. That's practice. Martial arts means going and fighting. That's practice. Starting a company means like, well, I don't have an idea. It means like I'm going to go out and do an idea, put myself on the spot, risk it, fail, and try again. So I feel that we need to do a lot more practice in our life as opposed to theory. And I guess one thing that I find really important in this process of practice is, as a mentor, I'm going to tell you not to listen to mentors or books. But what I will say is that one thing that I find with practice that is very important is to be constantly on the lookout for what is your path. So when I read books or listen to people or do martial arts, I'm going like, well, what's my style? How can I run a company my way? So I think this is the path of martial arts, because what happens in martial arts is the movement from martial to arts. Because if you become really, really good in the end, it becomes art. But if you start in the beginning, you just fight because there's nothing else to do. So with this talk, I'm asking you all to go from martial to arts. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Dima. So, Matthew, are you going to make up your entire talk off the top of your head from an audience suggestion or slides? Yeah. Okay, we'll go with the slides. Our last lightning talk for today, everyone. A round of applause for Matthew Scharf.
So hi everyone, thanks for coming. I'm Matthew. I'm a Scottish paper consultant from Scotland. And I work for a company called GF Smith, and it's quite nice to be here because a lot of you probably won't know who GF Smith are, but we are very much the opposite of what a lot of the topics and trends are relating to what people have been talking about today. Everything's very digital, whereas we are a paper company. We source the most interesting, coloured, textured, and unique papers in the world, and then present them in a really beautiful book. So it's quite physical, it's permanent. We've heard a lot about code deletion, AI, LLMs, and this is like the polar opposite. So hopefully you're welcome to have a look at this after. Have a dig through, have things in your hands, it's quite nice. I love paper. And what's nice about GF Smith, we don't just pile paper high in a warehouse in the UK and then send out the door, but we do lots of things which change paper, add value to paper. We put paper through rollers and emboss it with texture. We make beautiful envelopes. In fact, the black envelope that you got when you arrived was probably handmade by one of the people that you're seeing in this video right now. And then, of course, we sell paper for lots of interesting applications. Things like this, whiskey packaging, for example. Things like this, the Johnny Ive vanity project, you'll remember, which was all on our paper. And of course, one question that we get asked quite often is about the environment. And in general, paper has a pretty good story to tell. It's so kind of well regulated and governed nowadays. But more and more businesses and brands are looking to do kind of things or tell stories through paper which are different from just your standard FSC and all the rest of it. We're now B Corp certified, and we've kind of innovated recently in this space where we have introduced some fascinating papers with interesting stories. This is a paper called Extract, and it's manufactured from recycled paper cups. If you go to Starbucks, if you go to Costa, McDonald's, typically if you buy a paper cup, there's a polyethylene liner. The paper companies don't want to recycle it because there's plastic in it. The plastic companies don't want to recycle it because there's paper in it. So we've developed a process, along with our manufacturing partner, who strip out the paper and the plastic from the paper and then turn it into a brand new sheet. So they collect cups. This represents 1 minute worth of coffee cup consumption in the UK. So the problem was to try and, or the issue was to try and address the problem of paper cups ending up in landfill and then using it for something that could be reused. And then, it's easy to be cynical about these things, but when you go to the paper mill, I don't know what that bin bag's doing up there, but these are bales and bales of cups which have people's names on it where they've ordered their coffee at the counter. So it's quite tangible. And then these are then turned into beautiful packaging for brands like this. There's a tiny little brand in London who make eyewear from bioacetate. A company no longer exists anymore, unfortunately, but who make really beautiful wristwatches. And then another interesting paper, and I heard it was mentioned yesterday, but we've manufactured papers from seaweed. So this company, Nopla, are fascinating. They extract a compound from seaweed, farm seaweed, which they turn into bioplastics to tackle the dishwasher capsule market and so on. And we use that farm seaweed and reincorporate it into a new product, which can then be used for things like this. So that's a bit about paper. We're quite an interesting company. this is a recent project which I just thought was quite interesting called The Sound of Colour Plan. Colour Plan's a popular paper range that we sell, and we enlisted a company called Father, who are a sound design studio, to effectively kind of correlate the synergy, if you like, between colour and sound. So they actually set about creating a soundtrack for all of the 55 colours as part of this colour paper range. And then we launched it in an event called Portal, where we made these beautiful big portals which were filled with speakers, so you could almost experience the feeling of colour and sound in a physical space. And of course, because we're trendy, we made a vinyl, as you do. This is actually, we heavily believe in involving students in the future and talking about paper and print, because it's lost nowadays. So we enlisted the Manchester School of Art design course, graphic design course, who, we selected from, I think, 250 applicants, 10 final pieces. And their vinyl is now going to be produced, and we'll give these away for free as and when it's ready in a few weeks' time. And then Colour of the Future, this is a campaign that we ran a few years ago, probably 2017, where we basically asked anyone to go onto a website, pick your favourite colour, and as part of an incentive to take part, we said, if you win, we will make a new colour after that, and we will introduce it into our collection. And what we found was that we asked people why they liked that colour, and the responses we got were really diverse, really interesting, and it was just really quite fascinating. So we were able to kind of build colour groupings based on different criteria because of the words that people gave us. And then we actually published a 200-page book about our findings with colour. I'm running out, so I'm skipping by, but the next one is called Colour of the Future, and we just encourage you to go online, it takes 2 seconds, and tell us your favourite colour, or not your favourite colour, tell us your colour of the future. And I'm over time. So there we go. That was fast. And it's a book, if anyone wants to look at it.
Thanks, Matthew. So that was our lightning talks for today. Schedule note for everybody. There are 2 optional events at 5:30. If you're interested in a historical tour of the hotel, then at 5:30 they'll be meeting at the reception just out here. There's also going to be another tea ceremony in the Salon Bleu. But either way, it's going to be time to get ready for dinner, dress up if you want, or show up as you are, and meet here either at the reception or out in the courtyard area at 6:45, and we'll see you all then. Thanks so much for coming.